Hello, and welcome to Saddlefit for Life's presentation for the Healthy Horse Conference 2025, Bridging the Gap, Why Every Equine Professional Needs to Understand Saddlefit. Every one of us here at the Healthy Horse Conference is committed to making the horses in our care healthier, more comfortable, and better supported in their performance. And as equine professionals, we each play a vital role in creating the conditions in which horses can truly thrive. But no single profession and no single one of us can do it alone. It requires a team effort. And a collaborative approach means understanding not only our own area of expertise and becoming an expert in our respective fields, but also understanding how the other professionals within the horse's circle of care influence the entire system. And I'd like to talk to you today about one piece of the puzzle that has a significant impact on the whole system. And that piece is Saddlefit. Saddlefit is one of the most influential but most misunderstood factors in the horse's circle of care. When it's overlooked, we risk physical and behavioral symptoms that can compromise the horse's mental well-being, can compromise musculoskeletal function, and can affect internal health. But when it's done correctly, we have the power to positively influence the horse's three-dimensional back shape, creating changes to our horse's back and improving the health of the horse's back over time, which in turn creates a ripple effect that supports the work of other professionals within the horse's care team. And most of us can probably agree that proper saddle fit is absolutely essential for supporting a horse's health, comfort, and performance, right? Yet we see saddle fit issues at every level of the equine industry, from backyard ponies that are used for the occasional trail ride to Olympic level competitors. Saddle fit issues are everywhere. They are not isolated to any discipline. They are not isolated to a level of riding. They're absolutely everywhere on a global scale. And there's general agreement and scientific evidence as well that an incorrectly fitting saddle can cause the horse discomfort and pain, it can impair muscle development, and it can affect the movement of the back and the limbs. It can contribute to lameness. And despite these well-known consequences, studies in different populations have identified considerable proportions of ill-fitting saddles among riding horses, which is absolutely consistent with what we at Saddlefit for Life and our graduates have seen over the past 40 years working in the field. To give you an example, here's a study from 2021 called Feel the Force: Prevalence of Subjectively Assessed Saddle Fit Problems in Swiss Riding Horses and Their Association with Saddle Pressure Measurements and Back Pain. In this study, Dittman and colleagues investigated a population of Swiss riding horses, and they found that only 10% of the saddles were free from assessed saddle fit problems. Let's sit with that number for a moment. Only 10% of the saddles were free from assessed saddle fit problems. That means that 90% of the saddles they looked at had some form of saddle fit problem. That is really alarming. There's another study by Grieve and Dyson that found that a considerable proportion of ill-fitting saddles among riding horses was identified. They also found that 38.5% of the riders in the study experienced back pain associated with an ill-fitting saddle. So not only is there a high prevalence of saddle fit issues for horses, but riders are suffering as a result of saddle fit issues as well. And again, these findings are very much consistent with what we've seen over the past 40 years of working with horses and their owners to support their saddle fitting needs at Saddlefit for Life. So who is Saddlefit for Life? Well, at Saddlefit for Life, we've found that the leading cause of recurring physical and behavioral issues in ridden horses is pain. And more often than not, we found that this pain actually originates from the saddle. And most equine professionals aren't trained to objectively and comprehensively, this is important, assess saddle fit, which leaves horses in discomfort and it leaves their owners still struggling to find suitable solutions. So essentially, Saddlefit for Life is a global collective of equine professionals who have come together to provide research and evidence-based education with the goal of protecting both horse and rider from damage caused by ill-fitting tack. So we offer a number of different programs for horse owners and riders, all the way to certification programs that allow those that are interested in furthering their education in saddle fit to find evidence-based information. Our certified equine ergonomist program is sort of our flagship program that we offer. It's the first foundational course that kind of leads somebody on the stream for professional saddle fit education. And it gives veterinarians, trainers, body workers, saddle fitters, or anyone else involved with horses professionally, the tools to assess, identify, and resolve saddle fit issues confidently and professionally. In this program, students learn to evaluate saddle fit statically and dynamically. They learn to understand the interaction between the horse, the saddle, and the rider, and they learn to make informed decisions that actually protect long-term musculoskeletal health. What's really important for me to mention here is that at Saddlefit for Life, we have a number of different programs that, yes, allow you to become a full-fledged saddle fitter. So if your goal is to be able to fit saddles, that's something we can help you with. But we also have programs like the Certified Equine Ergonomist program, for example, that help you with the identification of saddle fit issues. So it allows you to measure horses, riders, and saddles for saddle fit to quantify physical changes in the horse over time, which is a very helpful tool. And it also allows you to really pinpoint saddle fit issues, which might be, depending on your profession, if you're a vet, if you're a body worker, you might not necessarily have an appetite for actually fitting saddles, but being able to identify and pinpoint saddle fit issues and being able to explain to the owner how those fit issues specific to their horse and their saddle are contributing to the behavioral and physical symptoms that the horse is experiencing that you are potentially there to resolve through your service is a very helpful addition to an existing service that you offer. So whether, evaluation and identification is your goal, or whether you want to go all the way and you actually want to also offer the solution, that's something we can help you with. So a little bit about Saddlefit for Life's history. Saddlefit for Life was founded by Jochen Schlese in 2006. Jochen founded Saddlefit for Life after sadly losing his horse Pirate, who suffered irreparable damage to the scapular cartilage caused by an ill-fitting saddle. Jochen was the youngest certified master saddler in Germany in 1985. And after losing his horse to the physical damage, irreparable damage that was caused by his saddle, he set out on this mission to protect other horses and their owners from the same fate. So he collected, a number of different professionals that worked together to curate the curriculum that we teach today. And in 2006, Saddlefit for Life was first introduced to the equine industry, and the Certified Equine Ergonomist course in its infancy was first introduced back then. And we have since taught students around the world. To this date, we've certified more than 10,000 equine professionals around the world through our self-paced and remote study programs that combine online theory with real-world case studies and expert mentorship. We understand that saddle fit is not something you can learn from a book, that you can learn from, just doing an online course, which is why we've combined online theory with hands-on practical experience that students can actually complete through a remote study program in order to enhance their own level of skill and knowledge. The Certified Equine Ergonomist program has also gained CPD approval for veterinarians and chiropractors in both Germany and Canada. And together with our graduates, we've evaluated more than 350,000 horses to date, which is an incredible number that we're very proud of, but there are so many more horses that need help and support. So if you're interested in finding out more, you can take a quick moment, pull up the camera on your cell phone, and you can scan the QR code here on the screen to find out a little bit more about our programs and possibly exploring joining our mission. My name is Julia Ellebrand, and I'm very proud to be here today to represent Saddlefit for Life and have this very important conversation with you. I'm a certified equine and saddle ergonomist, and I've had the privilege of helping hundreds of horses and riders resolve their saddle fit issues across North America. I used to work one-on-one as a saddle fitter in the field, primarily servicing the United States. And I love the one-on-one work with riders and their horses in the barn to really optimize comfort and performance. But I also really enjoy talking about saddle fitting, equine anatomy, and biomechanics in a more seminar setting, in virtual sessions like this one, or in person at trade shows like Equine Affair, or at universities like here in the middle, in the photo in the middle here with the veterinary students from the Ontario Veterinary College. I've found that by sharing the knowledge that I've gained through Saddlefit for Life in more of a setting like this, I can actually reach more people and I can reach more professionals who can then carry the information to the individual owner. Outside of work, I'm also a very passionate equestrian myself, and I am a proud horse mom to my horse Oakley, pictured here on the right. So back to the presentation. If we can all agree that saddle fit is fundamentally important to the horse's welfare, and we then once again reflect on that really shocking finding that Dittman and colleagues uncovered, that only 10% of saddles were free from assessed saddle fit problems in Swiss riding horses, it really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? So looking around at our audience here at the Healthy Horse Conference, we have a really diverse group, which is fantastic. We have veterinarians, we have researchers, we have veterinary physiotherapists, massage therapists, osteopaths, nutritionists, and many other equine professionals. And many of us work predominantly with ridden horses. So if you work with ridden horses, and if ridden horses are part of your practice, then your clients are directly affected by saddle fit. And with that, saddle fit knowledge, or at least an understanding of the horse's anatomy and biomechanics in relation to saddle fit, is not optional. If we consider that the prevalence of saddle fit issues is likely just as high across the broader industry as it was indicated in this study, then the implications are very serious. And every effort that we make in our respective fields to improve health, to improve comfort, and to enhance performance can potentially and probably is being undermined by poorly fitting saddles. Which brings me to the next point, the real-world consequences of ill-fitting saddles. So most of us know that poor saddle fit can cause physical discomfort, can contribute to behavioral changes and long-term musculoskeletal issues for the horse and affect the rider as well. But it's worth briefly revisiting these consequences just to fully appreciate just how critical proper saddle fit is in supporting a horse's health, comfort, and performance. So here on this slide, we just have a couple of examples of fit issues we see very, very frequently. We see insufficient space around the withers, pressure on the thoracic trapezius, and incorrect shoulder angles. We see laterally displaced saddles, like we see in both of these images here. And I chose, Western and English saddles here because I want to once again revisit that point from earlier, that saddle fit issues are not isolated to one discipline. We're struggling with this across disciplines. So when saddle-related pain starts to manifest, the horse is going to offer behavioral clues that are going to indicate discomfort. Some of the very obvious behavioral signs that many of us are likely familiar with include tail swishing, ear pinning, head tossing, grinding of the teeth, that notorious girthiness, threatening to kick or striking out, moving away from the saddle when the rider goes to tuck up, or moving away from the mounting block when the rider goes to mount. And then, of course, bucking under saddle is a very obvious one as well. But typically at this point, when we see these types of behavioral indicators of discomfort, the horse has already escalated the attempt at communicating, because earlier, more subtle clues were likely ignored, were misinterpreted, or were simply not seen. So we categorize these behaviors as escalation behaviors. The more subtle signs of pain can be identified earlier on using tools like the horse grimace scale to evaluate facial action units, including ear position, eye expression, nostril flare, muzzle tension, facial muscles, and head position, and then applying a scoring system to assess pain. Another detection method that is wonderful is the Ridden Horse in Pain ethogram by Dr. Sue Dyson, that is used to assess musculoskeletal pain and lameness in horses during ridden work. This system uses a total of 24 behavioral and physical indicators to assess pain and discomfort under the saddle, so used while the horse is being ridden. So ideally, as equine professionals and as horse owners, we have the ability to detect the subtle signs of discomfort early on, so we can move on to identifying the cause right away, and we don't wait until the horse's behavior escalates. Now, before we move forward with the rest of the slides, I want to just be very clear that, of course, my bread and butter is saddle fit and identifying saddle fit as a cause for discomfort. But I, of course, am aware that horses display symptoms of pain for a variety of different reasons. But how wonderful would it be if you have the skills to rule out saddle fit as a contributing factor? And you can go down that process of elimination a lot more quickly because you have the skills to evaluate the fit of the saddle right away, and you don't have to wait for a saddle fitting professional to do that on your behalf. Just to put that in your mind. So if we don't listen to those early subtle clues, not only is the horse's behavior going to continue escalating, but we also risk serious physical consequences for our horses, including muscle atrophy, soft tissue damage, restricted movement, specifically reduced scapular rotation, which is often caused by an incorrect tree width or angle and can lead to damage of the scapular cartilage like we see in the image here. We see reduced stride length and altered gait patterns or an inability to track up, often due to pressure beyond the last thoracic vertebrae or due to a narrow gullet channel. And this can, of course, lead to chronic compensation patterns and postural adaptations. It can lead to lameness, inflammation, focal ischemia, and swelling. And we also know that long-term musculoskeletal pain and stress associated with it is also a contributing factor to the development or exacerbation of gastric ulcers. And we also know that gastric ulcers do not have a high success rate at healing if they're being treated if physical discomfort is present that is saddle related. So sadly, most of us probably see physical signs like these quite frequently when we go into the barn to service our equine clients. And all of this is absolutely preventable. But not only for the horse, an ill-fitting saddle can have really serious long-term consequences, but the rider is a very important and very often forgotten about partner in this equation as well. So most commonly, riders report of back, hip, knee, and ankle pain either during or after riding. And discomfort in the saddle leads to postural compensation, which often presents in position issues. So we often see riders struggling with the chair seat, with a swinging or unsteady lower leg, or leaning with the upper body. And more often than not, those are not actually position faults or a lack of strength or mobility on the rider's end, but they're actually the result of the rider fighting their equipment. We also hear often of recurring urinary tract infections and bladder infections, as well as slipped discs. Those are kind of among the most physical consequences of riding in an ill-fitting saddle long term. So these are serious long-term health implications that riders are suffering from simply because they're riding in the wrong saddle. And us riders are notorious for putting our horses' comfort first, with the very best of intentions, mind you. We will ride in anything as long as our horse is comfortable. That's a phrase that I hear very, very frequently. But unfortunately, what that neglects to consider is the fact that if we aren't comfortable in our equipment and we're unable to ride with a soft and pliable seat because we are bracing or we are tense due to discomfort in one area of our body or another, our horse is going to feel that. So that bracing and that tension is going to translate directly to your horse's back. So even if the saddle fits the horse perfectly, if it doesn't fit the rider, the horse is never going to be comfortable. Okay? So that's a really important point to understand, that rider fit is just as important as fit to the horse. So at this point, you might be sitting here wondering, well, how does this relate to my work as a trainer, vet, physiotherapist, or body worker? Well, I'm going to go back there again. If you work with ridden horses, saddle fit impacts your clients and the outcome of the services that you provide. So saddle fit knowledge, unfortunately, is not optional. And if you don't consider the fit of the saddle or lack the tools to rule out saddle fit as a cause or contributing factor for recurring physical or behavioral symptoms that you're there to treat, then you risk missing the opportunity to potentially eliminate the root cause and provide lasting solutions to your clients. I mean, how many times are you working with a horse where you suspect that saddle fit could be a problem, right? If you could just go down that list and you could apply a simple method that I'm going to teach you in just a moment to rule out saddle fit as a factor, you could move to providing long-term relief to that horse a lot more quickly. So in the spirit of empowerment, I would like to take a couple of minutes here to empower you with some saddle fit knowledge. So we are going to learn an actionable skill that you can actually start implementing right away. I'm going to teach you how to map the horse. I absolutely love teaching this to all of the horse owners, riders, and body workers and vets and everyone that I have the pleasure of working with, because it is the first important step to taking the guesswork out of saddle fitting. And it's a very simple process that anyone can learn. So essentially, by mapping the horse, you're creating a roadmap of anatomical landmarks on the horse's body that are relevant to saddle fit to effectively identify the saddle support area. So what is the saddle support area? The saddle support area is the area on the horse's back where they can safely bear weight. By staying within the saddle support area, the saddle allows the horse to move freely and carry the rider in a way that supports long-term soundness. In essence, our fit philosophy at Saddlefit for Life is quite simple. Keep the saddle on muscle, stay away from cartilage, stay away from nerve endings, reflex points, and ligaments, and all of that. So just supporting the saddle on muscle. By keeping the saddle within the horse's saddle support area, we are not just enhancing comfort in the moment, but we're actually supporting the horse in a way that is sustainable and health preserving and welfare oriented long term, and that it's going to allow for that horse to develop the back and develop the top line and carry the rider, of course, if ridden correctly, and if other factors within the horse's circle of care are considered as well, but to carry the rider in a way that is sustainable for the back long term. So here they are, the 5 lines. If you can learn to put these on the horse's back, you can easily check whether a saddle sits within the saddle support area or not. Okay, so by learning the relevance of each of these lines to the horse's anatomy and to saddle fit, and learning to identify them on any horse that you come across, you're very quickly able to create a mapping like this, with this rectangular box here being the saddle support area where you want the saddle to sit. And by having these lines on the horse, you can then put the saddle on the horse's back, and you can very quickly and very effectively see, is the saddle sitting within the box or is the saddle sitting outside of this box? And if it is sitting outside of this box, you know that there is a saddle fit issue present, and you can then help the rider resolve that or source somebody to help them with this. So let's go through the lines very quickly. Line number 1 is the widest part of the horse's shoulder. So we can likely all agree that we don't want the saddle to sit on the shoulder. So the furthest forward that our saddle can sit is on line 2, directly behind the horse's scapula. And line 1 and 2 are approximately 4 inches apart. Okay, but when the horse moves, the shoulder blade is going to rotate upward and backward, which is why it is so important we don't just assess the fit of the saddle statically, but we also look at the fit of the saddle dynamically. So when that shoulder blade rotates upward and back, it is going to slide under the saddle. So in order to protect the scapular cartilage that we see at the top of the shoulder blade here, we have to make sure that the angle of the saddle tree matches the angle of the shoulder blade. So the angle at line 1 needs to match the angle of the saddle tree. Okay, so the saddle sits directly behind here, shoulder blade rotates upward and backward, angle of the shoulder blade matches the angle of the saddle tree. Now, line 3 is called our balance line. So we look at the horse's sternum. You can actually see it quite well on the right-hand side here. This is the highest point, is the balance line before the ribs split off. If you think about the rodeo, when the bareback bronc riders go, or even if you've ridden bareback yourself, where's the quietest place for you to sit? Is it back here? Or do you scooch up right to the base of the withers? Chances are you're sitting really close to the base of your horse's withers, because that is the quietest place for you to sit. Okay, if you're sitting back here, not only are you sitting on the weaker part of the horse's back, but you're also going to be in a very movement heavy area. So by aligning your sternum with your horse's, we can help you stay with the motion, and we can make sure that you're not being left behind. Often, when the balance point of the horse does not match the balance point of the saddle, the balance alignment is off, and riders are very, very often way back here. That's when we see riders tipping forward with their upper body to subconsciously try and align themselves with this balance point. Okay, so in order to identify line 3, we find the rear edge of the sternum, and then we follow that up, and it usually lines up pretty well with the base of the withers. We identify this with a dotted line. Next, we're going to find line 4. Line 4 is the last thoracic rib. There are a couple of different ways that you can identify the last thoracic rib. Palpation is, of course, the most reliable method for identification. So in order to palpate that, you will palpate the point of the hip. That's usually fairly easy to identify. With gentle pressure, you're going to migrate your fingertips forward until you feel the last thoracic rib, and then you're going to follow that curvature all the way up until into the spine. And then from there, you draw a straight line down. Very common mistake is that riders or people that are learning this skill are palpating the rib, and then when they get to the longissimus dorsi, which is sits over top of that rib, and it becomes a little bit more difficult, if not impossible, depending on the horse's top line, to feel that rib. They just kind of go straight up, which ends up making your saddle support area too long, which is a very detrimental mistake. So make sure when you're palpating that you follow that curvature and you envision where it actually goes all the way up into the spine. And then from there, you draw a straight line down. Okay, so you can see on the left-hand side here just how much that rib is curving. So make sure that you follow it all the way up. Do that a couple of times and verify that you're always landing in the same spot before drawing line 4. Because line 4 and line 2 are probably your most important lines when identifying the saddle support area, because they dictate the length of your saddle, the length of weight-bearing surface. So that's a very important one to make sure you get accurate. Line 5 sits about 4 inches beyond line 4, and that's simply to identify a reflex point. I'll briefly touch on the reflex points on the next slide here, but beyond the last thoracic rib, so beyond line 4, we have the transverse processes of the lumbar spine. So we have short, non-weight-bearing ribs. We do not want to have a saddle that extends beyond this rib. Sometimes in Western saddles, the skirt of the saddle is going to extend beyond. As long as that is not weight bearing, that is okay. But you have to always make sure that it's not weight bearing and that is not interfering with the point of the hip. Often on very short coupled horses, we run into that issue. But the weight bearing surface ends at line 4. Okay. And then, of course, to get your top and bottom edge of your saddle support area, we palpate the longissimus dorsi. We palpate gently with our fingertips. We move up until we feel a medium to hard edge. That's the edge of our supraspinous ligament. And we don't want to have any pressure, of course, on the spine itself or on the supraspinous ligament. So we draw a line there as well. And then we move down and we feel where the longissimus dorsi starts to thin off. But we always want to stay on the belly of the muscle. So that's, the bottom edge of our saddle support area there. Very quick run through. I do have a resource for you at the end where you can watch a step-by-step video and get a little bit more context on each of these lines and each of these points. And I will walk you through step-by-step how to do this again. So not to worry if you missed any of that. So next, I just briefly mentioned, we also have 14 reflex points on either side of the horse's body that are relevant to saddle fit. So each of these reflex points are associated with a unwanted behavioral or physical response, whether that is hollowing away from pressure, whether that is, immobilizing the front end of the horse, or just placing pressure like on the thoracic trapezius, that is a non-weight bearing area, and affecting, the horse's biomechanics in a negative way. So in total, the 14 reflex points are, again, on either side of the horse's body. We have the scapular cartilage, we have the bladder meridian point 13, of course, the non-weight bearing thoracic trapezius. We have 6 spinal nerves that we need to stay clear of. We have the bucking reflex point, and then we have 4 reflex points, the latissimus and the pectoral reflex points, that are associated with girthing. So we don't want the girth buckles to sit on the edge of any of these muscles. So these reflex points are also very important considerations. If you get really proficient in mapping, you can add those to your mapping as well to take it a step further. And then again, once you've mapped, you can take your client's saddle or your own saddle if you're looking at your own, and you could place it on the horse's body, and you can very easily see if a saddle fit issue is present. Of course, fitting a saddle goes well beyond this alone, but if there's one skill that I wish every equine professional had, it was mapping the horse, because it's so quick and so simple and can be highly educational for the owners in helping them understand, some of those physical or behavioral symptoms that they're struggling with, and connecting that with saddle fit. So again, if you're a rider, if you're a trainer, if you're a body worker, you cannot correct posture effectively if the saddle is forcing compensatory movement. If you're a trainer or rider, you can't develop rhythm, relaxation, or connection if the saddle is causing discomfort or pain. And you can't build correct muscle or straightness under a saddle that is going to restrict movement. If you're a vet or you're a body worker, yes, you can restore range of motion today, but if the saddle is going to restrict the shoulders, for instance, again tomorrow, you're back to where you started. And we're likely all familiar with this pain cycle here on the right-hand side, which is a simple illustration to show us the cycle that so many horses that we work with are stuck in. So we have pain that leads to muscle guarding, which restricts mobility, causing muscle weakness and atrophy, which decreases function and performance and causes emotional and mental stress, and the cycle repeats itself. It's our responsibility as equine professionals to help horses out of that cycle. And if the same ill-fitting saddle is starting the cycle after every visit, it's never going to end. As equine professionals, every time that we treat a sore back without addressing saddle fit to horse and rider, we're only treating the symptom and we're potentially completely forgetting about the cause. And that means that we're stuck in a perpetual cycle of symptom treatment. And that is not a satisfying experience, not only for the horse or the rider who's hired you to help, but also for yourself, because you're likely in this because you love horses and you want to help. So do yourself a favor, learn a little bit more about saddle fit, and take saddle fit out of the equation when it comes to your business with horses. So you might be thinking, well, I can just refer my client to a saddle fitter. Yes, you could, but consider what that really means. Your client would need to hire yet another professional. We know that economically times are tough right now and money is tight. Horses are expensive to begin with, so hiring yet another professional, there's probably a 50-50 chance that your client is actually going to do that. If they do, it's going to take some time for them to visit and assess the horse, and that horse is going to continue spending time in discomfort in the meantime. And that is assuming you even have access to a saddle fitting professional who is objective, who's not biased by brand, and who actually has a solid understanding of anatomy and biomechanics and is able to evaluate the saddle both statically and dynamically, because we know how important that is. So honestly, outsourcing saddle fitters is what we're doing currently. And it's one of the reasons that we continue to see such a staggering prevalence of saddle fit issues across all levels of riding and discipline. So not all saddle fitting professionals are created equal. You probably know this, but unfortunately it's the truth. Which brings us back to a question that we had early on one of the first couple of slides. Why do saddle fit issues persist across all levels of riding, despite the availability of evidence-based information and research? Well, we've pondered this question over and over again, and we have concluded that it really boils down to three main challenges that we're up against in the equine industry. The number one challenge that we're seeing all of the time is pain reaction versus bad behavior. Unfortunately, this is still something that we're working against in the horse world, that owners and even professionals misunderstand the horse's communication as disobedience or naughtiness. It is such a big problem, and horses often go misunderstood. So this misinterpretation of the horse's communication in relation to saddle fit or any other pain often goes undetected, which leads the horse to develop more physical discomfort and more compensatory patterns, and the cycle just gets worse and worse. By understanding the difference between a pain reaction and an actual behavioral problem, we are able to move to prevention. So as equine professionals, we need to continue using every opportunity we have to educate our clients to help horses be less misunderstood. The next issue that we're seeing is the lack of regulation. So in the saddle industry, anyone, regardless of skill or lack of skill, can label themselves as a saddle fitter without standardized certification or oversight. Unfortunately, manufacturing is largely unregulated as well. So that means that there are a ton of saddles out there that already contradict equine anatomy at the time they leave the factory. So they're never going to fit any horse. And that means that the market is flooded with a ton of ill-suited solutions that fail to consider the individual anatomical needs of horses and riders. And riders often unknowingly invest a lot of money into saddles that cause discomfort, pain, and potentially long-term physical damage to themselves and to their horses. So the absence of strict guidelines really undermines equine welfare, and it contributes to a culture where subpar saddle fitting is too often tolerated simply because the owner or the professional, they don't know any better. And that's a very dangerous situation. So this one kind of ties into the other 2 points, but there's no standard education, which I think is really the core issue of everything that we're working up against, which is why it's so great that we have conferences like this where we exchange information. But many equine education programs neglect to include saddle fitting into their curriculum. Even at vet schools, that is often the case. Or if saddle fit knowledge is included, it is so basic and so surface level, which leaves graduates ill-equipped to recognize saddle fit issues. So, we all know the wither clearance rule, but that's not all that is important when it comes to saddle fit. Again, the rider is often forgotten about. Gullet channel width is often forgotten about. Saddle length, the reflex points associated with girthing. I mean, there's so much more that you need to know, and we're just scratching the surface in a lot of these programs. If every equine professional at least knew a little bit about saddle fit, we could help so many more horses and their riders, and we could actually start tackling this global epidemic of saddle fit issues. So that's where you come in. At Saddlefit for Life, we have a range of different resources to help you take action. In the spirit, again, of the theme of this conference of empowerment, we want to empower you to help more horses. Whether your goal is to add a little bit of knowledge to your toolkit so you can speak confidently about saddle fit, or to offer a chargeable service through objective saddle fit evaluations, or take it all the way and learn how to fit and adjust saddles, we can support you. I have 2 resources on the screen for you that are completely free. There is no commitment to joining. Just scan the QR code and you will get access to these resources. So on the left-hand side here, we have access to a free trial for our CPD-approved Certified Equine Ergonomist program. Or on the right-hand side, we have a free saddle fit assessment tool that we've originally created for equine veterinarians, but it's a great resource for any equine professional, and it walks you through the mapping process in more detail, and it actually adds the saddle into it as well. So first we walk you through the mapping step by step on a live horse, which is a lot easier than doing it on a slideshow. And then we actually take the saddle and we look at a Western and an English saddle, and we look at the 9 points of saddle fit to the horse and guide you through how to quickly check those. So a great resource for you to take advantage of. I only had a small amount of time with you today, so there's so much more to learn. Make sure to check out these resources, and I'd love to get in touch with you as well if you're interested in, perhaps booking a call to find out more about our programs and just giving some feedback on the presentation, or just to, enhance your professional network. I would love to hear from you. My email address is just at the bottom here, julia@saddlefitforlife.com. Thank you so much to the Healthy Horse Conference Organizing Committee. What a wonderful conference it's been, and I can't wait to hear the last couple of presentations that we have lined up for today. Thank you so much for having me here, and I hope all of you enjoy the rest of the conference. Bye-bye.